Well, hello, leaders. Decorah Lutheran Church. I know this seems a little bit dirty. All right. So I wanted to share with you or walk you through the tool that we used previously to give us our standard for how we're doing COVID protocols. Um, on Thursday, I get the sense at the congregation council that we are going to talk more about these things. And so I think first, as even though I'll walk you through this tool, there are some things that you as a leader want to think about. One, and the first one is what is the standard that the congregation wants to use? I think you want to have a standard. I think you want to be utilizing that standard by which to filter and work through your decision-making process. And I mean, this pandemic has been going on for 22, 23 months now, and we're all done with it, right? And so there are feelings and opinions and all those pieces there that and judgments that can impede wise decision making. So you want to have a standard. So here's your choices for your standards, right? You can keep using the standard that we're using. Keep using what we call this COVID transmission tool, which is what I'm going to show you now. Certainly, you can pick another standard, whether it's some sort of, I don't know, based on CDC guidelines or I don't know, county guidelines or something that you make up. But you're going to keep standard and making sure, again, as this is sort of the law in it, right? We deal with the law of the real world, so making sure that's wise in those situations. Or three, I guess you could decide to not have a standard but you want to, as a leader, be really clear, especially as a congregation council, that we aren't doing the standard. So let me show you the tool that we have been making use of here. Uh-oh. Go. Let's share this. Okay. So this here is the COVID-19 indoor safety guideline. It is a transmission tool. It has come out of and sort of being hosted by the folks over at Michigan Institute of Technology, so MIT. But really, it is an application or a tool that combines the research around how this virus spreads and in what situations, and gives an answer or an estimate and a scientifically informed estimate on how many people can be in a particular space, how long they can be in that space, and what those folks can be doing in that space, and helps make decisions and help you make decisions. Look, this is really important, right? A few weeks ago, it was profoundly uncomfortable in our sanctuary. It was chilly, and a lot of us wanted to close windows and close doors and things like that. We got a lot of emails that just sort of were one sentence slogans, and that is fine. We've also had some more thought out requests and thought processes around concerns about membership and losing membership and things like that. And we can and really should have our theological and God conversations about these things. That is just as important, and in fact, more important probably than these tools here. But when we as leaders express these opinions with each other, then we have to be informed and we have to understand our stuff. Again, none of us are epidemiologists. None of us are medical kind of folks. That isn't what we are. But that is what we've been called to be. Okay. So another thing about this tool, again, as new studies and new information shows up, as we as humanity learn about this in a rigorous and scientific way, it changes this tool. So this tool looks very different than what we used to go back to indoor worship and go back to singing. back in April of this year, and looks different even from when we then restricted things and stopped singing, but still continued worshiping indoors. Last but not least, maybe you look at this and you are feeling a little bit intimidated. And I'm going to tell you this, that I've worked with all of you, and I trust all of you, and I believe in all of you, and I know that it's going to be a challenge. But you want to understand this so that you can make wise and well decisions for our community at DLC. So I'm going to, if you look at this and you're feeling stressed and say, I don't know, this is not my kind of thing, that's okay. It's not your kind of thing. It's not my kind of thing. But let's grow and let's do this together. Okay. So, like I said, this is the COVID-19 indoor safety guideline tool. I've described what it utilizes. If you're going to utilize this thing, there's a couple things that you want to do, and that you're going to, some information that you're going to want. You're going to want to have a sense of the space and the mechanical functions and the circulation and all that kind of stuff of the building and the different rooms in the building. And you're going to want to have a thought about the human behaviors, as in what will people be doing in those spaces. And then you want to be really clear and honest about your risk tolerance, right? And you want to make sure that you're clear and honest about that, not to achieve a certain goal, right? So maybe, I don't know, maybe I like it that I don't have to sing the Kyrie, so I'm going to be super risk averse, then I don't have to sing. That's a bad way to be risk averse, right? Certainly it's bad to be risk averse another way. Oh, I really want the congregation to be singing all loud and proud again, so I'm going to not be risk averse. No, you want to be really honest about that. Like, this is a real sort of sort of where our commandments talk about bearing false witnesses and being honest, is where we're going to be challenged as Christians. All right, so, but where do you find room specifications? Well, first, before we go over here, first step you want to do, in this upper right hand corner here, you'll see language and units. Language is fine unless you want to do it in a different language. Yeah, look, there's all these different languages. You could do this in a different language if you wanted to. I did it in English. Units is British. It's great. I don't want to use the metric system. So, you know, feet and inches and all that good stuff that we do in America here. And the mode you actually want to utilize is advanced. And the reason why you want to use advanced is because we have some pretty specific and special things in our building at DLC as part of those renovations that you did that really have made it so that we could worship indoors, and we want to take those into account. So once you see here's basic, and then you see how it changes once we get to it advanced. That is great. And the first thing you want to do is you're going to scroll down here, and there's an about thing that talks about different guidelines, and I encourage you to read those and understand those things if you want to. Also, up here in the upper left hand corner, it talks about different studies and guideline limits and who are the study folks, and you could take a look at those. Take a look at those if you feel moved and you're called to run that. Step one is to go to room specification details. Now you could say, well, how do I know the room specification details? That is a great question. I will link this document also to this video and send out an email also with this link. But here it is. We had identified before two worship spaces, the sanctuary and the fellowship hall. And we have about 2,500 square feet of room in the fellowship hall, about 10 feet of average ceiling height. We have a mechanical ventilation at this, which is great. This 3.0 per hour. We have this hospital and generation surgery filtration. This is world-class kind of stuff. So that's really, you can play with this, and I encourage, because these are all variables that you can play with, but this you can change, right? You can basically, I chose no recirculation. If you open doors and windows, you'll get a recirculation we've been putting in there of 1.0 per hour. Okay. But I just said no recirculation. I don't know. The biggest complaint that that we all, and the biggest source of discomfort that we all have, is when it gets really hot or really cold in that sanctuary because of those windows. So let's just say no recirculation. And we'll just guess at an average humidity of 60%. I don't have a good way, but that seems to be average. And then again, human behaviors are also things that are variables, but these are sort of what we got. Generally resting, talking normal. So resting means we're pretty much always sitting. Talking normal. That means in this case, you can change this. You'll see this in the tool. You can change this. Talking normal, the kind of masks that are wearing, how good people are at wearing those masks. I wonder some days I look at folks in the sanctuary and that 95% is generous. And then our immunization rate. You could play with that number, I guess. This immunization rate percentage is an informed guess on my part. Part of it is I do have a sense of who in our congregation isn't getting the vaccine for whatever reason, hasn't gotten it so far for whatever reason. And so, yeah, we are better than our county and then our surrounding community. But we're, I know I've heard some folks say, well, we're all vaccinated. Yeah, maybe 2/3 of us are. You may find this useful. Prevalence of infection in the community. This is not again a thing that you can play with, but this changes week over week. Right now we're 347 per 100,000. That's a very high infection rate. That's a lot of infection rates that we're still burning through per 100,000 people in Columbia County. And then on Mark, this first township saver, you're saying, well, what does this mean? I'm going to share with you all of what that means in a moment. But I just wanted to make sure that you know that you will have this information. Okay, so let me go back to our tool. Let's start with the sanctuary here. We said we're at about 2,500 square feet. We said our ceiling height, I should say, was about 10 feet. This ventilation was right at 3. Our filtration system is 14. And our recirculation rate will be 0 because I'm assuming we're closing the doors. Okay. This is our relative humidity. You can ignore the safe CO2 concentration because we're not working on CO2 stuff. Next, human behavior. We're resting. So this means that we're generally sitting down. Okay. Not generally singing or standing or doing like light exercise. We're generally resting. But again, as you see that this is a variable. So if you want to say, what does it look like when we're singing, you can pick that. Our respiratory activity is talking normal when we do talk. Okay. Let's take our MAC efficacy down to 70%. This assumes that people will have a multi-layer cotton or silk mask or better, or disposable surgical or N95. Okay. And that folks will be at 95% compliance rate. Okay. Okay. So those are those. Now there's a couple ways that we can look at this in terms of our risk mode. So there's a 2 limit my personal risk. This is not an appropriate, and the tool even says it's not an appropriate standard by which to make community standards. The one that we've been using is if an affected person enters the space. So how long can you be in a space when somebody who has COVID enters? Or given the prevalence of infection in our area or in our community, you can do both of those. If we did the prevalence of infection, you would put in, I think I said 347, you put in 347. But the one that we've been utilizing, we could go with that. We can go that route. And maybe in some sense we have, when we started singing again, our activity levels in the county had gone low. And so it was safe to sing. But let's use for now risk mode, and an affected person enters the space. Don't worry about room specific and human behavior. You've already done those as down here. I'm going to leave the rest tolerance here, but again, this is that sort of truth commandment that we have among our 10 commandments you can take this at any and how, from unsafe to extra safe. We previously were at 0.5, but let's go with 0.10. You want to pick what what are the people doing, and it's probably for in terms of the space. So let's go with these folks. Look, folks, you're not, our average age may be north of 64 or a lot of times, but I wouldn't say any of you are elderly. Go ahead and select down here. So this wild type was that sort of first one from 2 years ago. And we sort of burned through. Eventually we'll get probably Omicron data. We'll start getting into here if it matters, but we'll pick Delta for now. And then you slide over this and you slide this over to 67%. If you think that number is lower or higher and you have some data, then I'd love to hear that from you. Again, I get that number from sort of the pastoral conversations that I have and having a sense of who is vaccinated and who's not vaccinated. All right. The previous version that we were using could get us down to minutes, and we could look at 90 minutes, but let's just look at for 2 hours into a space. And what this is telling me, based on what we're doing and the way things are at right now, is that, oops, not whisper, I should say talking normal over here. So human behavior, resting, talking normal. Yep. We could have 100 people in our sanctuary for 2 hours with somebody with COVID, and we wouldn't get infected with those doors closed. Now, are we singing? No. Are we doing lots of standing up? No. Does worship look a lot like what a worship looks like now? Yes. Are people wearing masks? Yes, they are. And but see, what if you could say to yourself, all right, what if we are singing? Okay, so let's get this down here. What if we are singing? All of a sudden now, with these room specifications for the sanctuary, we're now down to 2 people for 2 hours. And if we really did a really fast worship in under an hour, we could get 4 people into the space safely, assuming that one of them had COVID. Okay. So, but again, every one of these are variables, right? So if you change one thing in this space, right? If you stop looking at Delta, starts looking at this strain, I would just look at Delta. If you decide you have a much higher risk tolerance than this, then okay, that will change the number. But these are what it is now. Let's go back quick. Let's go back to this sort of sheet with this information on here again. We can also have the information in there for the fellowship hall as well. A lot of these things are the same. So you could do the math for that. And again, you want to do the math for that, or you want to have a reliable standard. Let's go over here and say, let's do the same thing that we were doing before, but given the prevalence of infection in our community. So we're at 347. This is telling us something a little bit different, that we could have 22 people in the space. It's sort of what is the difference between these two standards if we had singing, but if we did our resting and our talking normal for 2 hours with everything else, we could have 169 people in there. What's the difference between the risk mode given the prevalence of infection versus if an infected person enters? This one tries to measure the chance guess at the chance that somebody who has COVID, whether they know it or not, comes in and worships with us. While this one just says, yeah, it doesn't matter what the chance is. This is assume that somebody in your space has COVID, whether they know it or not. Just assume that it happens. And this is how you can be safe. We have used this more cautious standard than that second standard so far. it's tough to decide how to, not tough, but you'll have to make some judgments or decisions about that. I'm going to include in the video and in my email to you all the link to this tool. I'm going to include the link on how to the link to, or yeah, a link to the document of sort of the various standard things in terms of the various measurements. I'll also include a link to the most recent Columbia County report I have, as well as the website that the CDC website that shows infection. They're communicating the same data. They parse it differently between Columbia County and the CDC, and it's a little bit hard. You have to do some of your own math to figure out your per 100,000, and the CDC will just give that to you. So that is the tool, and you get a number, and we can have and I think really the discussion isn't, I think the discussion that we need to have is, even if we have goals around, I don't know, like, again, it seems like we can close those windows and those doors and be profoundly safe with our immunization rate at this time. But the conversation is like, especially if it comes down to like, how important, like, I don't know, if singing is so essential to our worship as a Christian, as group singing is so essential to our worship as a Christian community, if we really, whether it's just important to us or we believe this is of a special importance to God, and how do we do this well and safely, then we really have to talk about our risk tolerance as a group. And I think that's going to be the real conversation. I'm going to stop sharing that screen, and again, I'll send you all this in there. Why is us getting this right important to Sterling? Why is this important to me? Well, I'll tell you, I would love to tell you that I have some sort of undifferentiated, profound love for humanity or something. And I probably do have some level of that, I hope. But really, this comes to me from personal experience. I guess my question to some of you is, have you ever been sure you've been responsible for the death of another human being? And I'll tell you what my answer is, and my answer is yes. Well, we're gonna have a confession here on video and on YouTube, and that's fine. Well, what is this? What do I mean? So I spent some time as a chaplain at Meriter Hospital here in Madison. It was a profoundly formative experience. It was part of a thing called clinical pastoral education, where I don't know, you don't know how to do pastoral care, but you go through lots of growth and things like that, right? It takes away from the academics to the real thing. So I remember one day going around and I'm visiting folks, and I got to a door, and the door said, this was so many years ago now, right? I mean, way before we ever thought about pandemics, right? And the door said, hey, don't come in here if you even at all think you're sick in any way, shape, or form. And here's why. This person has had a cancer treatment that has, I think they had their bone marrow irradiated. So they had no immune system. So they said, if you even suspect you could be sick, if you had contact with somebody who's sick, if you're feeling even a little meh, if you're unsure, don't come in this room. And if you do come in this room because you do feel great, because you have everything is fine, you haven't had contact, everything's perfectly healthy in your world, you need to put on this gown and this gloves and this mask, and you have to put on this whole suit, you do anything, but seriously, don't come in here because that stuff isn't good enough. Well, this was America, right? And in America, you go to work when you're sick. This was at least what we used to do. And I wasn't feeling great that day. And I didn't know if it was allergies or cold, but I really sort of thought it was allergies. And I wasn't really sick, but I was a little bit, I don't know, mucusy in my nose, but not a lot. Like I could breathe through my nose. I didn't feel perfect, but I also was like, I'm probably fine. And shame on me, I went in that room. Well, the next day, I'm at home and I'm doing some work for seminary, and my throat just starts hurting and my nose gets all really stuffy. And it was less than 24 hours from when I was there, right? Like, and I remember saying out loud, uh, oh no, I think I killed that guy. And I didn't say, oh no, I probably said a naughty word. And I was sick and I didn't feel great. And I had that weekend, I was on call at the hospital. So the first thing I did on that Sunday when I was on call, I went into the medical records to check up on that patient to see what happened with them, see how they were doing, see if they were still on the list. And that patient had died. They got some sort of virus or cold and it overran their system and it killed them over, I think it was Wednesday when I went into that room, and it was Thursday morning early that I started feeling really sick. By Saturday, it was a cold. So by Sunday, I was fine. And, and yeah. Now I've gotten lots of counseling and supervision, as we call it in, I don't know, sort of the counseling world. And so I got counseling and pastoral care and supervision around this thing. And folks have done well to convince me that at the very least, either to try to convince me that I didn't kill this person. And if I refuse to be convinced by that, to not be overwhelmed by shame and guilt around this. And so I'm there, I'm healthy around this issue. But part of me not having shame and guilt around this is that it's one of those mistakes that I just cannot make again. And so I really work hard to avoid making it again. Now, this isn't me being afraid. This isn't me having fear, I don't think, but this is me having carried that on my heart and on my soul, and know that I don't want to carry that again. And we as a community shouldn't carry that. So let's do well with these decisions. Hopefully this was useful and helpful and educational for you. I'm here at home and I have my lymph nodes all hurt and I have all the fever, and Bill Buckley gave me a pass from all committee meeting tonight. So, but maybe Thursday, or even hopefully by Wednesday night, I'll be feeling a little bit better for confirmation and for worship. And by Thursday, I'll be my old chipper self. If not, if I'm extra grumpy, I'll just try to be quiet during council. But I love you all. I'll talk to you soon. Be well.